Dear students, let us resume back our discussion on machine learning lectures. Let us resume back the discussion on convolutional neural networks. Let me share the screen. In this lecture, let us discuss what convolutional neural networks are and what are their capabilities. And we also see a couple of applications by them. In the previous lecture, we have seen that, as the name indicate, convolutional neural networks are driven by convolution operations for feature extraction, and they do have the ability to design the convolution operator itself, the kernel to be used for convolution through learning. And the learning is like neural networks. Okay, and thus the name convolution neural networks. Okay, and they can be deeper in the sense that they can have more layers. The number of layers, if they are high, we say that the depth is high. Okay, and they are deeper networks. So that's why the name deep learning has come for this convolutional neural networks. And the operation essentially happens at each layer is convolution or feature extraction, and followed by some compact representation of features that we will see now. They also have the ability to work on the data in their own dimensions. So as we can see here, this is a typical convolution neural network. So wherein the data is two-dimensional image, and the objective of this may be to classify this image into a person, cat, dog, or human, non-human, or any different number of classes. And this image, even classifying the digits, classifying the characters, letters, and so on. Okay, so it can be any of the objective, maybe any classification problem. First, we start with the discussion of classification problem. We'll see how these convolutional networks are also applicable for other applications of computer vision and image processing very briefly. But let us understand the convolutional neural networks first. So as we said, we start with the image in its or the data in its original dimension. And the convolution operation is the one which will generate the feature set at the next layer. This is the next layer. And these are referred to as feature maps. Okay. So if I apply 6 convolution kernels, each convolution kernel with the given image will give one feature map. Okay. So please note here, as distinctly from the conventional feature extraction, the dimension of features that we extract are of similar size as that of the original image. And each convolution operation gives one feature map. So essentially, if this is 100 cross 100, the dimensions of the feature maps are also roughly 100 cross 100, and 6 into 100 cross 100 feature sets we are getting, or feature maps we are getting. And this is very rich maps of features or set of features. And we will try to see from this low level features, in the sense that the single convolution operation, what it does is to extract edges, or it only couples the very neighborhood information to give the output here. So please note that we can consider each of these pixel locations as one neuron. So if this is 100 cross 100, this 100 cross 100 neuron layers, network of neuron having first layer as 100 cross 100 neurons, and the second layer having 6 into 100 cross 100 neurons. Okay, and there is no connection, complete connection between each neuron of this previous layer to this layer here, unlike in feed forward neural network. That is another major difference between convolutional neural networks and feed forward neural networks. So there is only neighborhood connections, in the sense that only the local neighborhood around this point is involved in making this feature. Okay, so and these same weights are shared across the whole image region. So what these feature maps have are produced by shared weights. Okay, so and these kernels are being learned, as I said. We will see that how do we learn 6 kernels now, which will appropriately use 6 different sets of features. And then subsequently, these features are very large in dimensions, as we can see 6 into 100 cross 100. So we want a compact representation of the feature set. For that, the next layer, usually designed in convolutional networks, is sampling layer, or downsampling, or subsampling layer, or max pooling layer. Okay, so it's either it's referred to as pooling or sampling layer. Pooling in the sense that if we have a small region here of feature sets, All features may not be important. In the neighborhood, whichever are non-maxima, for example, may not be important. Only maximum features let us retain in 2 cross 2. Okay, that's referred to as max pooling. Or 4 cross 4, we can refer to as 4 cross 4 max pooling. Okay, to retain only one value in 4 cross 4. So we can use pooling or downsampling to make a compact representation of these features. This is fine because we essentially, for taking decision, what we need is not the complete feature set, but dominating feature set and compact representation of feature set. Still here, we see that this spatial information is not disturbed. You can see that the features from here are here, features from here are here, in the sense that spatial details are maintained even in the feature sets. Even in subsampling, the feature details are, spatial details are maintained. So that is another very important and the ability of the convolutional networks. They are retained till we go to very high level representation of features. Okay. So after subsampling, see these features, as I said, may be low level features. Just by single convolution, we get edges, corners, only that kind of features. We don't get the whole face image and so on. That too, these are only locally extracted features. They are not looked at globally. So now if you apply on the top of these compact features another level of convolution operation, then this convolution operation looks at this much region. This much region here is roughly is equal to double the size of the region here. This double the size of the region is equal to even bigger region in the original image. So a small feature point here or feature value here represents essentially a larger receptive field or region in the original image. That's the power of extracting high level features in convolution neural networks. Okay, so you can see that we are extracting features of each of different regions and compactly representing in this set here. Each looks at a reasonably bigger dimension of receptive field. Okay, and this goes on. After that, what we have is this again, a large number of, say here you have 6 maps. Downsampling doesn't change the number of maps. After 6 maps, we again wanted, what we want to do, we want to represent them again in compact way. So I apply again double downsampling by 2. Here from 6 maps, we can get the 12 maps or whatever number of maps. To how do we get this? For minute details, we will subsequently discuss. But as we see in neural network, assume that each is a single neuron. How do we get the output of one neuron here? Essentially, as a weighted linear combination of neuron map 1 into weight plus map 2 into weight, map 3 into weight, and so on, will add up to give this map. Similarly, here also neuron output. Similarly, in this map also, this map will be W1 into this, W2 into this, and so on. That W into instead of into will have the convolution operation. W1 convolved with first map, W2 convolved with second map, and so on will give us one map here. Okay. So this is 6 maps will 6 weight kernels multiplied by the respective maps will give us one output here. Similarly, the next map. So for all 12, you need 6 into 12, that is 30, like 72 kernels. Okay, to get this. We'll see those details in more details. After that, we have actually the final layer, compact layer here. So if we feel that no more convolutions are required, we can make them to vectorize and then learn in the conventional fashion that we learn in neural network. Okay. So we'll see little more details about each of the layers. Locally shared weights is what essentially we are using to get the feature maps. Okay, you can see here, each feature map may extract different levels of or different kind of feature sets. Okay, as can be seen here. And in compared to neural network, the number of connections here are very less. As you can see, only the connections are local, not to the whole image. Okay, this neuron doesn't have any connection with other neurons except neurons in this neighborhood. Okay, so we extract only locally relevant information to come up with the feature values. But however, when you see in hierarchy over layers, this layer takes the information from a large region. Okay, so in that way, it is high. These are referred to as high level features. Okay, these are low level features and these are high level features, and these are even higher level features, and so on. Fine. As you can see here, this looks at this much receptive field, and this looks at roughly this much receptive field, maybe close to the whole image itself. Okay, that's how this pixel itself looks at the whole information here and takes a feature measurement. Okay, right. So here you can see how the convolution operation happens in convolution neural networks. If we have an image and if we have a kernel, what happens here is the kernel is applied on the image through convolution to get the feature map. Okay, and usually what we prefer to do in convolution neural networks is we want to embed the whole kernel, okay, inside the image while finding the features to get away from the border effects. See, if we put the kernel centered here, then there are some border pixels which are not there with us. So to remove the border effects, what we do is we start from pixel where we can completely embed the kernel in the image. Okay, and hence if the dimensions of image are, okay, here 5 cross 6, then the kernel is 3 cross 3. Okay, so you can start only from 5 minus 1 and you can stop at 6 minus 1. Okay, so the dimensions are what you get, the output dimensions will be, okay, the and this goes here, say essentially. So you can see that if the kernel is f cross f, f by 2 is left here, f by 2 is left here. Okay, so and middle one is added here. So in that sense, what we are doing is if m cross n is the original image dimension, m minus, okay, f plus 1 is the dimension of rows, n minus f plus 1 is the dimension of columns. That comes as an output of the next layer. Finding out the dimensions in neural networks, convolution neural networks is very important, because when we want to design architecture, what essentially we are designing is nothing but we are deciding on the kernel size, we are deciding on the layers, number of layers, and we are also deciding on the like how many number of features we get at each layer, or feature map dimensions, number of feature maps, and the output dimensions, and connect to the labels. So this architecture design essentially involves understanding, okay, and designing the dimensions of each of the layers and the number of maps in each layer, okay, and what layers to put in convolution neural network. Okay, so you can see that in the this is in the first convolution layer, but whereas in the middle convolution layer you don't have a single map there, you have actually 6 maps in the previous example, right? The first convolution layer has only 1 map, but after performing convolutions you have 6 maps, and after subsampling also you have 6 maps. From there, if you want to go to 12 maps, so you need to go each map. How does it come? As I said, okay, you have three kernel maps here as in the example, and the weight the weight kernel is 4 cross 4. So what we are essentially doing, 4 cross 4 cross 3, okay, convolution. If you do what, that's essentially giving a 1 neuron value here. That goes in convolution operation to get all the image of neurons or the map of neurons. Okay, so essentially the weights required to generate a single map from a p maps, okay, and with the kernel of f cross f is p into f cross f. And if you want to generate not single map but m maps, then m into p into, okay, f cross f. Those many number of weights are required to generate those many maps. And essentially these weights are in the form of a 3D matrix or 2D matrices of large number. Okay. So I hope this process of generating the maps in the subsequent layer are clear. What essentially we're doing is all the maps, weighted combination of the all maps, we take and generate 1 neuron here. And the weighted combination is not a scalar weighted combination, but a kernel weighted, like element wise multiplication of kernel with corresponding map, and second kernel with second map, and so on. And that gives 1 element. If we do convolution operation, we get 1 map. Okay, like that we do with different weight matrices or weight tensors. Okay, this is more than 2 dimensions. The matrix is usually referred to as, the arrangement of numbers is referred to as tensor. Okay, so if you do the element like convolutions with these tensors, what essentially you're getting is the set of maps. Okay, for each tensor you will get 1 map. Like that, several tensors, if you bring in, those many maps you will get. Okay, and in subsampling layer, what's happening? As you can see here, this A, all are same, but they doesn't look same for a computer. But however, if you do some subsampling, even the computer recognizes these two roughly similar, in the sense that they this compact representation, it doesn't in fact make much difference for a computer. Okay, either to recognize A from here or A from here. Okay, so that's why the subsampling of features or downsampling and max pooling of features is very important to compact representation of information. Also to remove some of the like shifting effects. See, if this A is slightly shifted, when I downsample, it doesn't matter at all. When I downsample by 4 times, even shift of 4 is roughly same. Okay, it doesn't matter. Even small rotations doesn't matter in downsampling. Okay, so it is a nice approximation to knock off the noise effects, downsamplings, and also the shifting effects, and also the rotation effects. Oh, to some extent. Here, it's happening? The subsampling. These 4 will come. One value will come from these 4. This one value may come through averaging operation, or this can come as a maximum operation of among these 4. Okay, here it is maximum operation. Here, this is again another maximum. So among these 4 and so on. Okay, so this is if you write this value from maximum of these 4, we refer to as max pooling. If we just do averaging, it is average pooling. Okay, pooling because you are pooling the information and putting here. Okay, conventional word that is used in signal processing is downsampling. Okay, and this downsampling can be done in different ways to make it that more explicit. People call it as pooling. Okay, as you can see this. So now this is essentially a whatever the architecture we have so far discussed is very well known architecture, first proposed by Jan LeCun for character recognition or digit recognition. So that has 5 layers: one convolution layer, one pooling layer, another convolution layer, another pooling layer, 4 layers, and a fully connected layer, that is final layer, to get the connected to the output neurons. Okay, so it essentially has 5 layers, and this network has shown remarkable improvements compared to feed-forward neural network based classification for digit classification. Previously, even if you train with large number of neurons in a feed-forward neural network, okay, even with for many epochs, crossing 93%, 95% was like a nightmare. But however, when worked with the convolution neural networks, even a simple architecture like this, having 5 layers and convolution operations appropriately trained, will easily cross 99.6% or 99 point close to 99.9 percentage or even 100%. Okay, so this is the ability of convolution neural networks. Okay, so we go with a little bit of dimensions so that actually we will also be familiar how the dimensions can be worked out in convolution neural network. Okay, so assume that the data set on which the digit classification or recognition is initially applied or done using this LeNet is digit MNIST data set. This is well-known data set for digits, handwritten digits. And we want to classify them into 10 classes, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 9. Okay, and there are 60,000 training samples, each of 28 cross 28. Okay, and there are 10 classes in the output, and we have 10,000 test samples. Okay, so of same dimensions. And this the objective is of training with this and testing with these samples to see that how the classification accuracies are. Okay, so let us see an example. You start with 28 cross 28 input. Okay, image, that's digit image. Now, when you perform convolutions, it essentially extract features. Each convolution operation, please note that it extracts features. Okay, whether it is in first layer or subsequent layer, it extracts only features. Subsampling operation does compact representation of information. Okay, these are only the 2 operations that are there in convolution neural networks. Okay, and final pooling layer, like final fully connected layer or flattened layer, will bring together all features and try to enable us to map to the class labels. Okay, that's the purpose of this. Okay, so now in this, if we perform convolution with 5 cross 5, this dimension is 28 cross 28, as based on the formula that we have discussed, m minus f plus 1, that is 28 minus 5 plus 1, that is 24. Similarly, 24 cross 24 is the dimension for the feature maps, and 6 feature maps we need to get, so 6 kernels we use. So the number of kernels we use is 6 and dimension of kernel is 5 cross 5. Now if we do pooling by 2 times, okay, or 2 cross 2 is pooled to a single value, okay, then what the dimension we get of each feature map is reduced to 12 cross 12 instead of 24 cross 24 before in this layer to this layer. Okay, as you can see, it is 12 cross 12 now. The number of maps doesn't change because pooling happens map wise. First map information is preserved in first map, second map is in second map, and so on. Okay, there is no interdistribution of information here. Okay, in pooling operation. After that, what happens? We want to go for 12 maps, assume that. And we want to use again 5 cross 5 kernel. Then the size of the map will be 12 minus 5 plus 1. That is 8. Okay, and then 8 cross 8 maps we will get, and 12 maps we need to get. So the number of kernels we need to use is, so each map will be obtained from 5 cross 5 into 6 kernel. Okay, so it's essentially tensor of 5 cross 5 cross 6. Okay, that will give us one map. Okay, through the conversion operations and additional operations. Similarly, 12 maps, if you want to get 12 kernels of size 5 cross 5 cross 6, or 72 kernels of size 5 cross 5. Okay, that will give us the next layer. Okay, and again we apply pooling, and then pooling essentially does the downsampling. Okay, as we discussed, pooling by 2 again we apply here. So it is 4 cross 4 now. So the number of neurons here are the feature values here. Okay, our features here is 4 cross 4 cross 12, that is 192. And this we just flatten it and connect to, okay, 10 cross 1 output labels. That's all. And this is what is done like feed forward neural network. And given this with random initialization of weights, obviously it doesn't put the class 4th sample into 4th class. Similarly, for other samples, they will be put into arbitrary class because the weights or the kernels here are randomly initialized. Okay, what essentially we see now is, we see a little bit on the process of convolution, pooling, little more on that. And we also see how the back propagation happens now. So because they are not put into correct classes, how do we compute the error and how do we back propagate? We see some details about it. So as we discussed, the dimensions finding in convolutional networks is one of the key important step. And what we said is W or M minus F plus 1. Okay, but in case if, see, the convolution operation also did not happen at every pixel. See, if I start convolving here, next pixel also usually I multiply with the same kernel. Okay, and element wise multiply, add and put here. But if I want to use with a stride of 2, then what happens? I skip one point in between. So I do conversion here, I skip one point, I do conversion here. 1 point is do conversion here. Stride of 3 means I will skip 2 points. Okay, 2 pixels or 2 feature neurons, and then move on to the next neuron. Okay, so the stride of 3 will reduce the dimensions by roughly 3 times. Stride of 2 reduced by 2 times, and so on. That has to be accounted. The other aspect is in general setting, as I discussed, we take only the kernel that is completely embedded in the feature map. But if we, in some cases, we may need to pad initially the image with zeros and then take the higher dimension for processing the convolution operation. Then in that case, the convolution operation doesn't start from here, it starts from here because there is some padding. If there is a big padding, it can even start from here. It starts after padding. What are the dimensions? Okay, from that such that we embed the kernel. So essentially, if padding is with P in the top and P in the bottom, so W plus 2P is the padded dimension minus F plus 1. But however, with the stride, we divide by S times, roughly stride of S equal to 2, divide by 2 times the dimensions. Okay. Stride of 3 will divide by 3. Stride of 3 divides by 3, so on and so on. So we should divide by S. So W plus 2P minus F by S plus 1. This is how the formula for the calculation of dimension works. The idea here is after padding, you see the dimension. Okay. And then you start the kernel wherever there is a complete overlap of the kernel with the padded image. And you jump by S times and keep going. And the dimension at each point, you get a convolution output and put in the next map. When you do that process, what is the dimension that you get in the next map? That's what we calculated, and this is the formula-wise calculations. Okay, so I leave this exercise to you people. Okay, you can tally yourself with these formulas that are given for the dimensions. So we have discussed about the dimensions of each subsequent feature maps from a given feature map for the given dimension of the kernel. Okay, and we also have discussed about the number of kernels to be used to get a particular number of feature maps. So now let us see the number of neurons, okay, that are in conventional neural network versus the convolution neural network. Here, please note that the same weights are shared across the whole network, okay, or whole neurons. See, if you consider each is a neuron, then in a feed-forward neural network, if we consider, see, assume that this is roughly 100 cross 100 as we discussed, or even here 28 cross 28. The number of neurons, input neurons are 764, output neurons are 24 into 24 into 6. That is 3,400, this much. So the number of weights in a feed-forward neural network framework is 764 into 34,056. Okay, and this will become a very big number. Okay, so these many connections or these many weights are to be used if you want to design a feed-forward neural network of this sort. Okay, these dimensions. However, due to the shared connections, we are using only 5 cross 5 kernels and 6 kernels to generate the whole set of neurons here. Okay, and thus the number of effective weights that we are using is 5 cross 5 cross 6, that is 150 plus biases, 6 biases. So the number of neurons that are required to generate large number of neurons in the next layer are very less because of the weight sharing operations in convolution neural networks. Okay, so and thus the number of learnable parameters are less. Okay, so the dimension and memory of the data is high in convolution neural networks because each map occupies reasonable space. Okay, and because the neurons are also big and the outputs at the neurons also we need to preserve as feature maps. So, but however, the number of learnable parameters, if we see, that is weights and biases together, they are quite smaller with the same of similar number of dimensions having in feed-forward architecture. Okay. So in subsampling, there is no neurons required because it's just a kind of deterministic operation. We either do averaging, okay, or we do pooling, okay, and no learnable parameters here. Usually, the number of layers in a convolution neural networks is calculated by as the number of learnable layers. Okay, so how many layers we need to learn, and even the number of parameters we calculate as learnable parameters. That makes the how complex the convolution neural network is to train. Okay, so we can do the similar exercise here. Okay, you can see here the number of kernels are 12 into 6 cross 5 cross 5. Okay, which you can see here, and 12 biases for each of them, network 1 bias. Okay, so and after we get the whole thing, we have got 192 dimensions, and then we connect to 10 cross 10, and here it is like a feed forward neural network only. Okay, so this is essentially the architecture of convolution neural networks. Now the next important question is, how do we initialize these kernels? As you can see, there are 12 into, see here 6 into 5 cross 5, here 12 into 6 into 5 cross 5. Okay, and then biases of 10 here, biases of 6 here, 12 here, 6 here. All these has to be initialized. How do we initialize? Is just based on the number of weights that we in the feed-forward neural network. What we have seen, it is based on the number of neurons in the previous layer, because there the weights are directly equal to the number of neurons. Here it depends upon the number of maps rather than number of neurons. You can see here input maps, the number of input maps, okay, and then the output maps. Based on that, we see how to initialize the weights. Here, if you see, number of input maps are only 1, okay, but the dimension of map is, number of input maps is only 1, but the dimension of kernel is 5 cross 5. So 5 cross 5 into number of input maps is referred to as fan in. okay, from where we start and do some operation. Okay, the span out, if we see here, is 6 maps and 5 cross 5 is the kernel size. So 6 into 5 cross 5 is referred to as fan out. Okay, so given these fan in and fan out, the how we initialize weights is 1 by root of fan in plus fan out. Okay, it's similar to what we have done there, 1 by root NH minus 1 by root NH to plus 1 by root NH uniformly initialized. Here also it is same, except that there we use the neurons to count the weight, to initialize the weights, the distribution of weights. Here, the same uniform distribution can be used, but the number of maps and the kernel size are used to initialize the weights. Okay. So let us see now. Same thing that's shown here. Fan in as whatever I have mentioned. Okay, and fan out. This is the formula to initialize the kernel weights. Initializing kernel weights here also plays a very important role, because unless we initialize properly, we are not ensured that the convergence happens quickly or even to a process like one among the good local minima or global minima, close to global minima. Okay, so initialization here is also very important. And there are several papers and publications, research articles, which will tell how to initialize more efficiently. Okay, so this is just the mathematically representing. Here at every neuron, what we are doing is we are doing convolution sum, okay, of the this map, this kernel, okay, with this map, okay, and then what we do is activation function is also applied. So I forgot to mention that convolution is followed by activation function in all cases, because we need the nonlinearity to learn the nonlinear decision boundaries. Also non-separable samples classification. So nonlinearity is introduced after each of the convolution operation. And this nonlinearity comes from usually the activation function, and usually the defined activation function is ReLU activation function. Okay, so and see, this is what a clear picture of how the 6 maps to 12 maps we get. Okay, at a layers where we have more than one map, what we do is we have actually 6 maps here. We have 12 maps we want to get in the subsequent layer through convolution. So how do we do this? This map comes from convolution of this one kernel, this with another kernel, and so on, and add them all of them. Okay, it is like if you consider this map itself as a neuron and this map itself as another neuron, what essentially we are doing is this output here comes from, okay, the all neurons, okay, all maps, and this is weighted sum. These are now each of them are 3 cross 3. However, if you consider as weights, these are all weights, these are all neurons, and weighted sum of this will give one value. Okay, so now the dimensions are changed, but the interpretation is same, how we get the next set of maps. Okay, so this is the analogy between feed-forward neural network and the convolution neural network layer. Okay, one layer of convolution neural network and one layer of feed-forward neural network. Okay, so hope you people understand, and that's how we get the whatever number of maps we want, and this is mathematically put in the convolution operation. Okay, so because D maps if we have initially, if you want to get C maps, then what we do is for each map we get this operation, do summation over D. Okay, capital D, and added by bias, this is what we get as the output, right? And see such maps we can get in subsequently to get as many number of features we want. So here is the final layer. So you can see here each of the, after you get the 4 cross 12 maps, okay, in the pre-final layer, that's also called penultimate layer. So here we flatten them in the sense that we just arrange them in vector. Here spatial information is lost, but however, we are now objective is to map to the class labels. Okay, and hence we want to use make use of all information to assign it to class 1, class 2, class 3, and so on. Okay, thus we can formulate a cost function with the actual labels here, obtained labels here, and get the cost and back propagate it. Back propagating exactly goes like in conventional feed-forward neural network, but here, so this layer, it just goes like the back propagation in feed-forward. From here, again, the errors here, whatever we have, are made into 2 dimensions. Okay, And after making these into 2 dimensions, the back propagation also goes, okay, from here to here, there is a convolution operation, right? So here to here, subsampling operation. If we want to back propagate, what we do? Opposite of subsampling, downsampling, that is upsampling we do. Okay, if we have done pooling, in the pooled location, we keep the whatever the back propagated value here, okay, whatever is the feature value here, and remaining locations we keep zeros there, okay, in the back propagation. Okay, so that what exactly we do as forward operation. For the errors, so in forward operation, information flows from here to here. From the information flow, we estimate the labels. From the labels, obtained labels and the original desired labels, we calculate the error. In the reverse update for the weights, the error propagates now. It's not the information. The error in each of the informations, each of the feature maps, each of the feature map outputs now gets propagated. Okay, back propagated. So error, how does it back propagate? So error, if you have an error value of something here, it is put in the maximum location. Remaining will be zeros. If you had applied max pooling forward direction. If you have downsampled it, average through averaging, okay, whatever error you have is equally put at all locations. Okay, like that the back propagation happens. The inverse operation of this happens in back propagation. Similarly, in the forward, you have done convolution. So you can see that magically or comfortably or conveniently, the inverse operation of this convolution in forward process becomes correlation. Okay, in the back propagating the errors. So some kind of correlation with extended region happens to have the errors in the higher dimensional feature maps or the subsequent layer feature maps. Okay, so and then again subsampling here in forward direction, so upsampling or unpooling happens. Okay, and then from here it is convolution, so correlation happens. That's how the back propagation happens. So thorough discussion of back propagation again I reserve or I convey probably in the next course, in the next semester, deep learning course. Yeah, so the feature maps, if you look them, how they look like is, see, feature maps, as I said, look like they extract the information of original image, right? So this is one feature map, okay, which looks probably like, okay, this is input sample itself. Okay, this is one feature map, 6 feature maps, and you have several such feature maps here. Okay, this may be in another layer. Sorry. This for one and this may be for another one. And these are the feature maps. This is 12 feature maps. Okay, so you can see that 12 feature maps are shown here. Okay, so the feature maps may or may not indicate really some understandable information. Okay, that is one of the critic of the convolutional neural networks. Okay, so they do demonstrate that they have high level features and do perform outstanding classification and computer vision tasks, but you can't visually understand the feature information. Okay, so that's one of the important limitation or the still a research area in convolutional neural networks. How to interpret them and how to understand the features that are extracted in convolutional neural networks, or how to make them more understandable, explainable, and so on. So if we just want to make a comparison, you can see that the feed-forward neural network, when trained with 33,500 neurons for 1,000 epochs, has given only 93% accuracy or 7% error. But if you the same thing that is trained with convolutional neural networks with linear architecture has given 96% of accuracy. Okay, so you can see that simple training of CNN will give much higher accuracy than a very big network of feed-forward neural network. So this can be attributed to using the spatial information, using the feature extraction together with the classification framework, okay, and also using the weight sharing mechanism and receptive fields, looking at the bigger receptive field by a small neuron and so on. Okay, so given that this boost of performance for classification, people thought of applying this to a bigger and bigger data sets, more and more diverse problems. Then see, the big data set is created by Professor Fifi Lee team at Stanford with 1.5 million images and 1,000 classes. And in fact, it is created for 14 million images and then 1,000 classes. But the available for training and testing, they made under the name of ImageNet as a like 1.5 million images, 1,000 classes. This is the one of the biggest data set first like gathered for demonstrating or understanding the capability of these convolution neural networks and deep networks. It shows that the potential of the deep neural networks is very effective even in classifying 1,000 class of images, okay, across very similar looking interclass variants and intraclass variances. Okay, so you can see that the interclass variants may be similar, intraclass variants may be different. Still, we see a very good performance of convolution networks demonstrating that. That is the first demonstration on a large data set, and that gave rise to that's referred to as ImageNet challenge. It was launched as large scale image classification challenge for several years, and several of the deep learning networks have emerged from that challenge. So people started then looking and gathering lots and lots more data sets for all the problems. And the deep neural networks are in need of data, and they will be able to do much better if you have enough data. So, and hence this drive to the data collection has been very active. And for each of the problems, okay, data collection is done either for object detection or detecting the anomalies, or detecting the like understanding the images, or many other problems. Okay, you can see a collection of data sets here. So as I said, this large scale visual recognition challenge started in 2010, and the conventional methods were applied during that time, like computer vision methods for classification of this 1,000 class data set, and they could only give only 70% close to 70% accuracy. Subsequently, in 2012, the first deep learning architecture that is referred to as AlexNet is applied, and this 7-layer network was 8-layer network was able to give close to 85% accuracy, which is roughly 10% jump from previous year, which is not feasible at all in computer vision for since last 50 years. So then the boom for the convolutional networks has come, and they were very successfully applied in object detection, segmentation, and many of the computer vision tasks, and demonstrated performance of boosting by several amounts the conventional ability of image processing and computer vision methods. So thus all computer vision researchers mostly adopt or develop the deep neural networks as well. Okay, so now you can see that subsequently bigger networks are developed. So in 2014, and two networks, GoogleNet and VCC, which are very famous networks, are developed, which is the 18-layer, 19-layer, and 22 layers. Subsequently in 2015, ResNet with 152 layers is developed. 2016, again another version of ensemble network. Okay, and then and so on. So CNET. These are all networks started becoming more deeper and deeper, having more layers, and to have a gradient backpropagation from this from the output layer to the input layers, there have been some mechanisms like skip connections and so on in developing the networks. And the other very important aspect that is research is how should the update of the weights has to be. Should it be simple gradient descent or gradient descent? Okay, gradient descent, or with momentum term, or with even better optimizers. So Adam optimizer is very well known, that uses momentum term and some scaling factors through variances and so on. Okay, so then subsequently by 2017 itself and 18, we cross the accuracy of on this data set for visual recognition of image classification. Like deep networks crosses the human classification ability, which is approximately calculated from large number of humans and annotating them. So we can see that the power of deep networks has been grown, and they started applying on all the computer vision tasks. So to name few more, so this is referred to as segmentation task, where we want to classify not just the whole image to one class, but each pixels to one class. Okay, this can be, this is cat pixel, this is gross pixel, and so on. So pixel level classification is required in image segmentation or semantic segmentation. See, object detection is other application of computer vision, where we want to identify where the object is. We want to identify that object is at cat, that is class of object, and also where it is. Similarly, when there are more objects also, we want to exactly tell at what xy and height width the object is. Also, we would like to identify the xy hw, that is the xy location of each of the objects and height and width of each of the objects. Okay, and subsequently we want to do instance segmentation, in the sense that where exactly the object is. Okay, the instance of the object where it has occurred. For all this, deep neural networks work very well, and they beat the conventional computer vision methods by many folds, and their developments are in many folds, and many of the well-known architectures exist as a land models itself to directly use. Okay, so for example, if you want to detect where object is, what I know is want to do is I anyway want to give the classification score, but this is not good enough. I can't do it at every pixel. I want to know where the object location is. So I need to do two processes here. One is classification, another is regression for the object bounding box coordinates. That is XY location from where it starts and height and width of it. So that's usually done. Okay. So in object detection, in semantic segmentation, what I want to do, I want to say that this is grass. Okay. This is sky and so on. So each pixel has to be labeled like this. Okay, so one way is X has to take each patch and give it to a CNN and classify into one of the four classes: cow, grass, sky, and trees. Okay, but this is very crude approach. What people do is, can we get the whole features at a stretch and use all those features to label at each pixel? And can we have an error also defined at the pixel, at all pixels? And this error together at all pixels, okay, we calculate the classification accuracy at each pixel and put together as the classification error at each pixel, all pixels, and back propagate to adjust the kernels of these convolution maps. Okay, so convolution maps, how do they get updated? Because each convolution map is obtained by a kernel, and hence if we modify the kernels through gradient descent, we update the kernel feature maps. And you see the difference between the conventional CNN and this one. If you see, the main difference is the dimension of the kernel feature maps is not reducing here. Okay, because we need the output map also of same dimension as that of the input. Such kind of, and there is no fully connected layer or flattened layer. Thus kind of neural networks are referred to as fully convolutional neural network. Okay, only convolution operations are there from input to output. So another variant of it is this, where you can see that, see, if you go like this, the number of feature maps are very high and high dimensions. So the other way of doing is you reduce the feature dimensions, fine feature map dimensions, and get very crisp features, and again increase to the output dimension so that I can get the labels in output dimension. Okay, so this is referred to as another fully convolutional neural network. Okay, referred to as SegNet, one of the well-known architecture first came up for object segmentation. Here you can decide on the number of feature maps, the kernel sizes, okay, and based on that, the dimensions of kernels or feature maps, the network architecture will be. And the backpropagation happens from this output, whatever you get here, that output may not be exactly matching with the class label, and we use the gradients to backpropagate. So while going in the backward pass, okay, while going from, this is referred to as encoder, where we encode features, and this is referred to as decoder, where decode the features. Okay, in decoding operation, we do exactly somewhat reverse of the encoding operation. See, in encoding, we may do like this. In decoding, we are putting the exact value here. Okay, so no. Yeah, so in the decoding, what we do is this is max pooling. So yeah, in decoding we do this. So you have actually 2 cross 2 and we want to get larger dimension, right? So how do we get in decoding? In sense, the decoder, see, if you see the decoders, the dimensions keep doubling, okay? Or we want to unpool or increase the dimensions. So for that we repeat exactly like how we were back propagating before with unpooling, we do for decoders now, okay? So same thing is here. And in some of the networks, there is a connection between this one and encoder and decoder, so that we know some information that has happened here. We try to retain that, use that information for better upsampling or bringing into higher dimensions. Okay, so they have been applied for street video segmentation, and this very famous application where autonomous cars, etc., are all driven by, and they are applied in wide variety of data sets, even in satellite image classification and segmentation. Okay, so previously these methods, these applications have shown only limited light, but driven these deep learning methods, we see a very great potential, and many of the markets and the many of the top industries, companies are almost after this to get the real applications where the computer vision can demonstrate the many automation happen, many places to make the automation. Okay, so the other application is object detection, where you can see that the previously conventional methods have the mean average precision of detecting the objects is only 40%. Use of deep networks has raised them, boosted them straight away by 10%, and subsequently it has gone almost double what we could achieve in the last 50 years. Okay, so close to from 40 to 80. Okay, so now let us see how does object detection does. As I mentioned before, not only classifying to one of the class, we also want to know exactly where the bounding box is. So we do have a classification. Along with that, we also have another class for regression. Regression is for the bounding box coordinates, where exactly the bounding box is located, x, y, and hw. We want to accurately locate it, so it's a real numbers. So we do regression. We want to tell what class it belongs to. It's a classification problem, classification. Regression loss and classification loss gets added and backpropagated to adjust the kernels and weights of the convolutional neural network. Okay, so this happens even for detecting large number of objects. In such cases, there are two-step process usually. One step is to say whether there is an object here or not. Okay, it's a binary classification. Object exists, doesn't exist. Okay, and what is the bounding box location? X, Y, S, W. So regression also happens, and the classification happens for region proposals, saying that in this region there is an object. That is region proposal. Okay, referred to as. And in this, if there is an object, what is that object? We see the classification here. Okay, and more accurately finding out the bounding box coordinates. This is referred to as FastRCN, one of the well-known framework for object detection. And this enables us to do object detection even in large number of, when we have more number of objects in an image. Okay, so I skip the details here. In the, as I said, this discussion is mainly to motivate you or to understand that the convolutional neural networks are applicable not only for classification, but also for many computer vision tasks. The details of them are more discussed probably in the next course in the upcoming semester. As you can see here, for measuring the objects, detecting the objects, we don't even see at a single scale. We have a provision to look at different scales through anchor boxes. So all these are explored. So some of the computer vision techniques are borrowed and applied here within the deep learning frameworks to detect the objects, to identify the location of objects, and so on. Many other applications that we have discussed. Identifying the 3D shape of the object, tracking of the objects, and so on. Okay, I will conclude here. So there are several challenges in the rotated objects. How do we do? How do we do segmentation in Indian data sets while we have very good segmentation in foreign data sets? While the training is only with the foreign data sets, the problem may be testing maybe in Indian data sets. So in that case, how do we adapt them? Okay, so all these are typical problems in deep learning based image processing or computer vision. So there are good references for it. Most of the video lectures are good references. The references are in terms of video lectures and good papers. published in very well-known conferences like CVPR, IC, CV, ECCV, and so on. Okay, you can see good references that are cited here in slides from Professor Fifi Lee Stanford video lecture. Thank you. We will conclude our lectures of machine learning for image processing here, and we will have a class to just have an overview or to clarify any of your doubts, and subsequently we will go ahead with the conclusion of this semester. Thank you. Hope you have enjoyed the course. Bye.